Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
All right. Well, I grew up in the U.S. my whole life. I actually have a pretty abnormal expat story because my parents still live in the same house that they did when I grew up. I've never moved ever in my American life until I went to the Peace Corps. And that was the first time I had ever even moved. I went to university an hour away from my parents. I was very insular, very American, nice way. I'd only been to Mexico and Canada. Very classic standard American, which is unfortunate, but it is a sort of true stereotype about Americans that we don't travel enough. And I was definitely living that. And then went to the Peace Corps, and I decided after that, to stay in Albania, lived there for 5 years, and just moved to Bangkok. So just Albania and Thailand, very new to the expat.
And can I ask what part of the U.S. you grew up?
Yeah, I'm from Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is an hour away from Boston.
And Kyle?
So, yeah, my growing up was a little bit more complicated because I moved around a lot. So I've lived in North Carolina, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Texas, back to Connecticut. I moved to North Carolina. My parents now live in Ohio. I've never lived anywhere longer than 6 years. 6 years was it. And that was when I lived in Connecticut the second time. But then, after that, I haven't lived anywhere for longer than, or in one place for longer than 4 years. So I've just kind of been on the move. And then similar to Diane, after I finished university, joined the Peace Corps, went to Albania. I kind of knew from, high school age, university age, that my trajectory in life was international, was finding a way out. And Peace Corps was the perfect avenue for that. Got out with Peace Corps. We stayed in Albania, worked at international school there, and now we're here in Bangkok.
Now, did you two meet and go do the Peace Corps together, or did you meet in the Peace Corps, if that's not too personal?
A commonly asked question. We met, or we did not know each other before.
Yeah.
We actually met in the Peace Corps.
Yes, we were the Peace Corps couple. That's us.
That's really sweet. And you were doing Peace Corps in Tirana or somewhere else?
No. So we flew into Tirana, and then we went to Elbasan to do training for 2 months. But we were actually at host families outside of Elbasan in smaller villages. We were in 2 different host villages even. We weren't even in the same host village. So we would only see each other when we would come in for training into Elbasan. Then you get assigned for your 2-year assignment all over the country. And Kyle got assigned in the mountains near Elbasan, and I got assigned on the coast. So we were very far away from each other. Yeah. Basically on 2 different planets, which is funny because Albania was so small, but yeah.
Okay. And did either of you study Albanian at all before you got there?
I did casually with a friend just to be polite because I was really afraid of leaving and not being able to be polite. But my pronunciation was not as good as I thought. But we were very blessed to have the Peace Corps give us some introductory lessons. Although I think that's not what helped us the most, learning it. I don't think that's how we learn the most.
I went in with 0, essentially nothing. I had read a little bit about the country, but as far as language goes, there weren't a lot of resources online for Albanian language, which you may or may not know. So I think maybe one day back in 2014, I looked up a video, a YouTube video, just to hear what Albanian language sounded like. And there's
so much more now on YouTube than when we left. Because it's so weird to think about the internet as a new thing. But as you know, YouTube was just becoming a big thing in 2014. You know what I mean? It was very much on the rise. Platform had just changed. People started posting videos. YouTubers were becoming famous. Now it's the normal way you watch TV, which is so crazy. So now it's much more readily available then.
Yeah, I basically came in with nothing. And like Diane, it was, interactions with locals, what lessons we got from Peace Corps, which were a lot in the beginning, but then after that they drop off and there's nothing.
You both grew up with English, I imagine. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. I like to check. Did you have any other languages at your disposal before Albanian?
No. I guess it's not fair for me to just say no, because I did take Spanish in high school. But when I say I lived the regular suburban American life, I'm talking average America, middle class America. like I had Spanish class. I was okay at Spanish, but when I went to college, I forgot all of it because I didn't continue. So I was exposed to Spanish, to some Portuguese that was around us. Ironically, there's a huge Albanian population in Massachusetts. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that when I was
no idea.
and I had no idea. So I didn't know that the languages that were being spoken were so different and diverse. And now that I've lived abroad, when I go back, we hear it all the time, which is funny. I lived there my whole life and I had no idea.
She could have been practicing before she left.
I could have got a tutor. I had no idea.
Well, okay. Is there a reason why there's this Albanian population in that part of Massachusetts?
From what I understand, the first, and I could be wrong, but from what I've heard from Albanians as well, is the first Albanian immigrant to the U.S. went to Boston.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was apparently the landing place of the first Albanian immigrant.
Albanian Orthodox Church there as well.
Well, who knew? Well, you guys do, but
your language pre-Peace Corps.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say like before Peace Corps, I was definitely exposed to a lot of other languages, but I was never like fluent or really more than, I don't know, basic conversational. And no, that's true.
You took German in college.
Yeah, but basic conversation now. I'm not.
Okay.
Anyways, the point is, like growing up, I don't know. I remember as a kid, when I lived in Texas, that was when I was first exposed to Spanish because there are a lot of Spanish speakers there. And then as a kid, one of my neighbors, and when we moved back to Connecticut, one of my neighbors and good friends spoke Spanish and German at home. And I remember hearing those languages a lot anytime I go over to his house. I had another friend who also spoke Spanish at home. So I remember, like, from a young age, exposed to languages, kind of like, oh, this would be neat. And I think I was in third grade. They offered like an after school Spanish class for some elementary school students who are interested in it. And I did it, but it was only like a 2-month thing. I learned like colors and how to count to 10 and those kind of things. And that's it. I dropped off. And then after that, I did Spanish in high school up until like, I don't know, maybe my junior year of high school. So only 3 years of Spanish. And then I took German in university. Go figure. I thought that would be different and interesting. And I had never really used it. My Spanish, I did end up using more just because like I went on a trip in university to Peru and I got to use some Spanish there. I used it sometimes at like the little Mexican owned supermarkets or little markets in town where I'd buy groceries sometimes. So, but that's it. I wouldn't say I was never close to fluent and just pretty minimal
so
basic
modest.
Conversation. Yeah. I'm being factual.
Modest.
So for the folks who are watching this who are like, Albania, can we do a quick, my husband likes to do, like he's from Idaho, so he likes to do like, this is the US, California's over here, New York's over here, Idaho's up here. He always does hand comparisons. All right, so if this is Albania.
Yeah, this is
Albania.
Yeah, okay.
This is with the thumb and everything.
That's
this
right.
Really?
Sorry,
like
this
this
is Albania. Oh,
okay. So where would Italy be on that? In comparison
where did
to
we live?
No, where would Italy be? I want to give people a reference to Albania as a whole, and then we'll go.
Italy's over here. Greece is my wrist. This is Greece.
Yep, this is down
This
there.
is Italy.
This
is Corfu.
That's Greece.
Corfu's over here.
Okay, and now with that global reference, now where did you guys live? Because you said it was in very different parts of Albania. So can you show us?
So I lived like here.
Okay, so the bottom
I lived in
below
a town called Vara,
Mhm.
which is a small Greek minority town on the Riviera. It's very near and dear to my heart. They're some of my favorite people in the whole world. So it's like a home away from home for me. I still talk to a lot of them, even though we moved away. I can keep in touch with a lot of my friends there. But yeah, I lived in Himara down here. Kyle, where did you live?
I was over here in the far east, eastern central part of Albania.
Here.
Yeah, close to the North Macedonian border.
Is that up in the mountains?
I mean, no,
It's on the way.
it's accessible. Like it is, like it's at the base of mountains. It's surrounded by mountains.
If you wanted to drive to Lake Ohrid, you would have to pass the town.
It's called Libraj for people that are curious. So it's a small town, less than, I don't know, maybe like 7,000 people max.
Wow, that is small. Now, were you both teaching language or doing something different in the Peace Corps?
We were doing two totally different projects. I taught English. I taught with a co-teacher in a local high school. I went in and did my best. It was actually really challenging, but I did learn a lot from my co-teacher. And I had a really hard time, but a really good time. And the expectation is just different when you're a volunteer. It's kind of hard to figure out what your place is. But I did learn a lot. I also faced challenges because we were taught Albanian as the language of Albania. But I, like I said, lived in a Greek minority town. So even at the public high school, you would go in and you would teach in English, and then there would be the good kids who could speak, and they would translate to the kids in Greek or Albanian. And some of the kids only have spoken Greek for their whole life. Like they don't really know, even though they learn Albanian in school, it's hard for them. So I faced that where I had basically a trilingual classroom, which I had never done in my life. And well, as I mentioned, I had only really been to Canada and Mexico, except I did a service trip in college to Uganda. So I did do that. I did leave the continent once before I moved off the continent, but I'd never even been to Europe, like I was wildly prepared and unprepared for what I faced. It was really challenging. However, I learned a lot. I did a lot of tutoring outside of school and a lot of like English conversation stuff. I did a lot of translation. My best favorite project that I don't take any credit for at all because my friend really did all of it. He created a tourism website for the Riviera, and he speaks like 4 languages, 5 languages, ridiculous, like one of my best friends. And he wrote everything in English, and I just went through and edited it for him, like to make sure it made sense. But I tried to keep it like quirky and local still, because you don't want to change everything. You want it to be authentic. But I spent a lot of time translating, and we're actually doing an update, which is exciting. And, we've got all this time in COVID now. We're doing an update of the website, which is a nice refresher. That was like my favorite project, I think. But it was cool. Like, it's the Peace Corps, when you think of it as an American, you think like you just do what you're told to volunteer to do. But really, the projects you do outside, of course, what you go to volunteer to do is very important. And it was good and it was great. And I learned a lot, and I hope they learned a lot, and it was a great experience. But the more sustainable thing is the relationships you build and the time you spend in your community. So I had like a lot of good time doing language exchange, and I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff, running an English club with some local girls, and now they're in college, which is so weird. So yeah.
They've grown up.
Oh, weird.
I guess to give a little bit of background of how it worked, like with our Peace Corps group, they only offered basically two sectors as they refer to it. So there were the English teachers, which is the cohort that Diane was a part of, and then I was a part of a cohort called community development, which is very
organizational development.
Organizational development. I mean, it was this organization that. Anyway, the point is, so they're two very, very, very different yet overlapping kind of fields and sectors. So I got placed with an NGO in Libraj as my primary assignment, World Vision, which I think actually is pretty well known internationally.
It's a pretty big organization.
It's actually a Christian NGO, which I thought was surprising. I had no idea they had a presence in Albania before I started with Peace Corps. Anyways, I was placed there, and my counterpart, the person who you're trusted to be with, that coaches you along, was there for 2 months, and then she got sent to another office to work. So I had to find a new counterpart, so to speak, within that time. But like Diane said, you learn that you've got your primary project, but Peace Corps is much, much bigger scope than that, right? So it's really your involvement in the community. So while I was there, I did much more than just work with World Vision and their projects that they had. Also developed an after-school English club, did a lot of work with the local high schools doing like youth programming and activities, did like a water project where we applied for a grant and then used the funding to build a bathroom in a school that didn't have any running water. And yeah, tutoring was big. Spent a lot of time tutoring, working with people of all ages from like 5 to 65.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as Diane mentioned too, like also just building relationships with people in the community, talking to people like every day, getting coffee, I feel like was my primary job.
Oh no, that's terrible. Let's dig into the language part then. I know my impressions of Albanian when I first got here, but I'm very curious what your first impressions of the language were. What did you think of the sounds or like the different stuff you were hearing and seeing? What were your impressions of the language at first?
For me, just because mine will be way faster than his.
Yeah.
For me, like I said, didn't speak a lot of languages. I did have friends from other cultures, but they all grew up in America, and the primary language you use is English. Like, I say this lovingly, but I was a little ignorant. So going into it, like, I didn't even know what they were saying, what the sounds meant. Like, they were talking about certain grammar forms that in English, they were like, in English you have this. I was like, I don't know. I just say the words. Like, it was very challenging for me to figure out just like your first general impression, because I was just hearing strings of words. You know what I mean? I wasn't hearing like meaning. It was just initially, it was just strings of words.
And it didn't sound like anything else you had been exposed to at that point. No, it's a very different sounding language. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, my first impression, just upon hearing it, as we're talking about sound, is definitely not like anything I had heard before. It's definitely not a Romance language in any way, shape, or form. It's not Slavic sounding, although there are moments where it feels like it sounds like it could be kind of Slavic. It's not. Still very different from Greek. Mm-hmm. Very like, it's got those few like Turkish loan words here and there, and they're thrown in. But it really is kind of its own thing. And I don't know. I'm trying to go back to what my first impressions were of the language. I just remember thinking it's just different. It was different, unique. It sounded nice. It sounded kind of, I thought so.
I had the opposite impression. I thought it sounded very blunt.
I think it depends on who you talk to, or who is speaking, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I thought it had kind of nice, interesting kind of like melody to it. It's not, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to put myself back into that mindset.
Like almost 6 years ago now.
Over 6 years ago now, or close to 6 years ago.
For sure. Wow. Well, I'm still just over 2 months here, and this is so weird to say, but I grew up with Albanian around me, but I never learned to speak it. And yet when I got here, I just was hit over the head with, it sounds like Russian. And I know that's going to offend some people that I don't mean it to do, but the rough parts, I think, Diane, you were talking about, it sounded kind of a little rough. Those
very
parts,
blunt. Some of the language sounds very blunt and very brash, and you don't know what people are saying. Also, I found that like even here, now that we've moved to another country, when we don't know what someone's saying, it automatically sounds already a little more aggressive most of the time. Then on top of that, they do have like a straightforward kind of louder language. So I think to the American untrained ear, it comes off as like, what's a loud language I know?
I don't know. I think the consonant clusters and things, I don't know. It just sounded so Russian to me. And I never thought of that as a kid. But I think as a kid, I didn't know what Russian sounded like. And as an adult, I've heard it. So it was just weird. It took me by surprise. You mentioned that using the language, I think, is what is more of how you learned it than the actual lessons that you had. Is that
100%?
Yeah, we had two very different journeys in that category, but that's mostly because I was in a Greek minority town for 2 years, whereas Kyle was in like an authentic Albanian town. Not that, I mean, parts of Humara, they're very it's very political. They're going to be like, I'll say Diane, and they're going to all come at me for this. But, there is a Greek minority there, and their first language, their mother tongue is, some of them is Greek, some of them it's Albanian. So I was never getting like I was only getting pure Albanian from a few people, and then I was getting pure Greek from other people and a mix. So my first year, it was really hard for me to distinguish the words and understand when someone was saying an Albanian sentence to me by using certain words in Greek.
Oh my.
You know what I mean? Or if they're saying a sentence to me and use words in Albanian, I ended up getting someone who became one of my best friends. I somehow convinced him to tutor me in Greek. I don't really know how. And I was just like this poor, sad American girl. So I think he was like, I'll help you, you lost little lamb. And he helped me learn Greek, and that made it easier to differentiate. Also, my host family spoke only Albanian, so I started to be able to recognize the rhythm in the language, and just speaking and trying and being in situations where you try and it's either you get this correct and you buy the things you want to buy, or you get it wrong and you get nothing. You know, like being in those do or die, so to speak, such a situations, whereas that's what helped me more. What about you?
For me, it was really just so like my whole strategy towards learning languages or approaching languages, and Diane sees me do this all the time and goes crazy, is kind of like talking to myself in my own head before I say it. And I can't, and she'll see like I'll kind of get like lost or start to daydream or something for a minute. She'll be like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just kind of doing my own thing."
They'll like rehearse
Don't
and
worry about me.
practice, whereas I don't. I'm just like, is this water or am I asking for grapes? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Kyle practices.
So
on
I'll do that until I'm confident, and then I'll just start speaking to people with what I know. And then if I've maxed out with what I know, then I just sit there and listen and try to absorb. And that's really how I learned. I just slowly built on my vocab started to slowly grow and expand over time. And once you know how to, like, if you can conjugate verbs in the present tense and in the simple past tense,
you can go along.
Then that'll get you a lot of mileage. And then you start to figure out the different nuances of the language as you go along.
The listening too, that's a really good point. Is like my Greek was way better when I could listen to my close friends all speak to each other in Greek, because all the first language would be in Greek. And then sometimes they would speak Albanian or English for me. But when I was listening, they would be like, "Aren't you bored?" And I'd be like, "No, I think it's interesting."
Yeah.
Then when Kyle would come to visit my town, they speak in Greek, and I could tell him, I know what they're saying, but I can't say
She
it
couldn't
yet.
reply.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about, because my vocabulary was getting a lot better. Not perfect. My Greek is far worse than my Albanian, but I try.
And especially in the beginning, a lot of what I do is I just watch people's mouths when they speak. Now it's hard with COVID to do that, but
Good point.
but pre-COVID days, I wouldn't look people in the eye. I'd just look at their mouths. I'd just watch how they were speaking and how they were forming, like what shapes they were making when they were speaking.
Putting the sound emotion did help a lot, actually.
Yeah, those are basically the strategies that work.
Cultural generalizations. Could you make any cultural generalizations when you were first learning a language? Because now you probably know a lot, both culturally and linguistically. But at first, were there things you learned, like language bits that you learned that you were like, "That's interesting. We don't do that in English." That's like a culture moment within language.
I think it's interesting that Albania has a verb form that will say, like, I am doing this verb to myself. I clean myself. I wash myself. Do you know what I mean? The reflexive verb. Whereas in English, never say it that way. Reflexive verbs. In English, never say it that way. Like, I will take myself somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's very distinct, certain ones. But it was always really interesting to me that some of the verbs have a callback.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The way that they are reflexive verbs was really interesting. And I also found that, like, slang in Albanian is really interesting because, you know, in English, we have really stupid slang as well, or nonsensical slang that if you were an ESL learner, you would be like, wow, this doesn't really make sense. But I had never learned that from another perspective. So when I started to learn slang, it was weird because I was like, but this doesn't mean this. Like, one of my favorite slang words is when someone calls someone like an idiot or a moron or just useless. They call them a bucket.
Oh, say it in Albanian.
Legen. Call them a legen, which means bucket. It literally translates to a bucket. Time I heard someone say, "Oh, he's such a legen." All these things. I was like, what about him is a bucket?
It also means Also mean your
means?
hips as well.
Yeah, like, and also means hip.
Depending on context.
Okay,
Your body.
It's so weird because that word, when you literally translate it, and we learn the word bucket, and then you hear someone saying like, "Oh, that guy's such a bucket," you're like, "What are you talking about?"
a bucket is useful though.
In this case, no.
Yeah.
No, dirty bucket. Big insult to call someone that.
Well, what's interesting for me about Albanian, and now this might be, I don't know, like I feel like I've experienced this and asked other Albanians about this too that speak multiple languages. But I feel like just very basic and simple conversations in Albanian are more exciting for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't like, and I don't know how to like express it more than just saying that, you know, like just having just basic chit chat.
Yeah.
For some reason it feels more intimate than in English.
There's also more involvement, more emotion to mundane things. What we would consider mundane, like no one likes the small talk in English, right? Like, how are you? I'm good. How's your family? They're good. And you just move on. But like in Albanian, it really does sound like more emotional, more like building on it.
They're also, they're really good at communicating. They're good at communicating in a sense that they're good at conversing with one another. I'll say like they're really good at getting to know people because they're
not afraid to ask.
Like the language is like it, and the way people talk is very curious. It's with a lot of questions. So you start out when you greet someone, you're asking them like five different ways of saying like, how are you? Or how'd you spend your day? Right.
How did you sleep? How'd you spend your day? How is it going? How are you? Over and over.
But then usually it builds to something. And then you start asking questions and questions and questions. And like,
it builds to, are you married? What's your salary? Do you have
the 5 questions? Yes.
Yeah. But like people aren't afraid to like ask some of those personal questions up front. So they'll get like right to the bottom of a hot topic or a debate really fast.
Yeah.
And it makes the conversation really fun and engaging. Whereas I feel like maybe in English or some other cultures, it's small talk. And you might have to know that person really well or feel kind of comfortable around them or like kind of gauge their personality to figure out how the conversation's going to go. Albanian, maybe a little bit less so. It's a little bit more like they cut to the chase. And I like that.
Yeah. Small talk in English ends. You know what I mean? It's the mundane thing to do. Small talk in Albania, I think you're right. It's much more like, it feels like people actually care. You know what I mean? They're not just asking to ask. That's why they ask 500 different ways about the same thing.
Yeah.
And I do find myself using a lot more qualifiers when I speak to Americans, like saying, if you don't mind sharing, can I ask this, that kind of thing, than I do literally anywhere else in the world. Because I've been outside the country during when it's gotten more touchy to ask things. And so I've just,
When we lived in Albania, I don't think I ever said, do you mind? Or would you mind? You know what I mean? You just don't say like, that. Are you gonna like, here's a thing. Do you want this thing? You know what I mean? Like, it's very straightforward. I like that about it.
And if it's something that you know or trust, really, you're not using a lot of niceties around them. Yeah, it's just to the point.
Yeah.
And it feels like if you did overstep in some way, they would just tell you and it'd be no big deal.
Yeah, exactly. You can,
or it'd be a big deal or it'd be a small deal, but they definitely tell you.
Yeah. And a big deal is not a complete deal breaker, depending on what it is. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything like you would tell someone who is starting to learn Albanian about what might help? Not resources necessarily. Oh, Diane, you're already on it. Go ahead.
Find an old person. If you're a male, typically it's an older male. If you're a female, typically it's an older female. And do what they do. Sit with them, listen to them, let them talk at you, even if you have no idea what they're saying. And I mean like your mom and dad's age or like grandma, grandpa age. Like one of the people I speak Albanian, I still do, but I speak Albanian to most and especially my first 2 years when I was really language learning, was one of my colleagues who was a 65-year-old teacher, like waiting for retirement, nice guy, just like wanted to get coffee and hang out. And he didn't care if I didn't understand him or we could only get through a few sentences every day. You know what I mean? Like he didn't care at all. He was just happy to sit and have coffee and babble on about whatever. And old people also repeat a lot. I find that they're very, very patient. So they will be willing to repeat over and over again. Like my host dad and my host mom in the village outside Elbasan, when I didn't know like fork and spoon and bowl and those things, and they had to figure out how I was going to eat, they would literally hold it up and say it over and over again, and like pirun, pirun, loo, loo. You know what I mean? And it felt kind of childish, but that really is how my vocabulary got better, is being around older people in Albania that don't know English, that are just going through their regular life. That's what I think is the best way.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No, I agree. I mean, and one of the things too about learning Albanian that, I mean, can make it easy if you have the patience, if you have the time, if you're able to spend time in Albania, is just hang out with people. It's a very social culture, as I'm sure you've noted by the amount of coffee shops. Just that's just sincere. All of Albania, there's coffee shops everywhere.
Even in the smallest town,
even the smallest town,
nothing.
There will be the coffee shop. So coffee's sweet. So find that person, like Diane said, old person, whoever. Find that person who you want to go to coffee with, and that'll help you learn. All I did, I remember in Peace Corps, they tell you this too. They're like, your first 2 months are going to be real slow. Take your time. Say yes to a lot of things. I said to coffee with so many strangers. Just walk up and down the block. I'd say hello to people. I'd greet people. And then eventually, like, some people would start inviting me to coffee. And then that's how it all happens,
Yeah, definitely. That's another good point, Kyle. When an Albanian asks you to do something and it's safe and nice and, you know what I mean, you feel good about it, never do something you're wildly uncomfortable with. Obviously, like, be smart. But when you are feeling good about it and it's going to be a good thing, like a coffee or even going over for a dinner, they're so hospitable and nice. Like, just say yes and go. And even if you're like, I won't understand a word they say, it does not.
Yeah, it takes a long time to learn, especially if
a lot of patience.
Like Diane said, we were lucky. We had the Peace Corps, and we had that 2-month language program, which is a nice base. Mm-hmm. But then after that, it's what you do with it, right? So I mean, you could. Because after that 2 months, you could forget it all and not use it.
We had people in our group who just didn't need to use it in the communities they were in. Like, they found people that they worked with who spoke good English, or they had people in their friend group who were younger, and they were in areas where they had younger populations, whereas Kyle and I were in places where that wasn't as common. I did have a few people who spoke English in my town, and Kyle had like one or two. We had a few for each, but primarily our day was hearing and engaging in other languages. And I think that is really what made it better. Like, it's very hard to learn in Tirana when everyone wants to speak English with you.
Integration was key, and just being around the language. Yeah, like Diane said, I think because we moved to Tirana after we finished Peace Corps, and people when they find out that you're not a native Albanian speaker get excited and want to practice English. So I feel like we spoke a lot more English there also because we were teaching at an international school.
Right.
But it's much easier to speak Albanian outside of Tirana, in my experience. Granted, if you've already got that base, then Tirana's fine. You'll be speaking Albanian all the time. But if you're trying to learn, I recommend going to a smaller town. Going somewhere where there is a smaller amount of English speakers.
Find someone old, hang with them, see if you can go farm in their farm or something.
And just
a lot of coffee. That sounds like a good plan. Such a good plan. How long do you feel it took you to feel confident in using the language? And I'm not talking about perfect grammar and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about being able to maneuver it to convey the meaning or the questions or whatever.
I mean, it depends on, I think that's a hard question only because for us, it depends on the stage of life. Like, within a few months, I was comfortable getting on a bus, knowing where I was going, asking for the price, basic, those things. You know what I mean? Like, I was comfortable doing those type of things, but I wouldn't say that I was comfortable in talking about things I wanted to talk about with people until, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 months into Peace Corps, maybe 10. That's when in Albanian I could talk about politics or religion or ask questions or have like bigger conversations. And even if I didn't know a word, like, I could get around it enough that they could tell me what the word was. Like, that's when I really feel like I was confident, when I didn't know how to say a word and I could say, hey, it's like this thing and I don't know how to say it, but it's like this. And one of my Albanian friends could be like, oh, it's this. You know what I mean? Like it took me maybe 10 months.
Yeah.
Maybe a year, something like that.
I'd say with just the amount of exposure we had to the language, especially the first 3 months we were there, I'd say by the time I was done with the language training, I was able to have like basic conversation with people. I could order food, a coffee, could talk to people. By the time I got to my assignment, my post in Libraj at the NGO, I spoke to everyone in my office in Albanian. Granted, full of grammatical errors and whatnot, but that's how I communicated. Because my counterpart, the one that was there only for 2 months and then left, my replacement counterpart spoke no English.
It's a lot of trial and error.
And the people in my office, there were a few that spoke English, but felt more comfortable speaking Albanian to me. And that was perfect for me because I wanted to speak Albanian selfishly. I didn't want to speak English. I wanted to speak as little English as I could. So yeah, I'd say within a couple months, I was able to have like pretty basic conversation. It took a while to get to the point where I could just casually listen into a conversation, understand contextually what's going on. I think that took at least a year. And then after that year, like you start building.
Our first year was.
You start building really fast.
The first year is the big build. Like that's when you start to get confident in what I'm hearing is correct, that I understand it the right way. I can ask a question or I can do this. You know what I mean? Like I'd say, probably a year for us to be like confident in no matter what the situation is, we can say something.
Yeah. You know? I'm not feeling that way right now about Thai.
We've also got a very different script.
Yeah. Can't read it. No,
we've got
here in that.
I feel like, I don't know, just given our circumstances with COVID and everything.
Yeah, COVID's a big hindrance on it as well. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
We're shooting for the 2-year mark.
We'll get there. We're also in Bangkok too, much more international city. Yeah. So it's
we'll get there.
We have to dedicate ourselves a little bit more to the language.
We can dial back our expectations too, because I think we're both very driven to learn, and we're very into like we want to like we're so passionate about learning Albanian and using it, and me learning Greek and trying to use it successfully, and that meant so much to us that when we moved here we were like, we're going to do it, and we're still working on it. There are things we can say now that
we've got our taxi tied down.
I couldn't say a few months ago, but we'll see. I think it's going to be the 2-year mark.
It'll take longer.
Maybe 3, who knows?
Just because it in a way, like with Peace Corps, it was kind of like our full-time job to learn language.
That's true. Yeah, and with the less exposure to people, and you're in the big city in Bangkok, and so there's a lot of factors stinging against you. Once you can go to a smaller place,
and with the masks, I can't read the lips. I can't.
Yeah, well, again, the script, the tones, and just oh my gosh, there's a lot going on there.
There's a lot.
But with Albanian, like if you were to compare how you feel, and I'm playing with this question, I'm not sure if I'm going to ask this a lot going on, but I'm very curious if you feel different when you're speaking Albanian than when you speak English.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
We describe it best as in English, I'm the confident, talkative one. I'm the one who's talkative and confident and sociable and like outspoken and argumentative, debate.
Or type
oriented,
A.
Type A. When we're in Albanian, he's that.
I'm kind of a different
like nothing.
character almost.
Yeah. We call him Albanian Kyle.
Yeah.
And our friends who watch this will laugh because our close friends, we all call him Albanian Kyle.
It's almost like what personality
it really
is
or
something.
It's crazy. I've changed too. I get more soft-spoken. I get those things.
I don't...
Albanian Kyle.
I'm still me. I'm still the same me. It's just... I think I become a little bit more excitable and expressive.
You're just more outgoing.
Yeah.
That's what it is. You become an extrovert. Because in English, he's much more introverted. But in Albanian, he's like the extrovert. And I think it comes from his first few months there, not to be and psychoanalyze you, but I think it comes from his first few months there when he said yes to everything. He got so exposed socially in those social conversations. So it's so much easier for him in Albanian, and also like
it's the social culture and social language too.
In the villages for young men, it's a very social culture.
Yeah.
Whereas in the village, I'm not saying all of Albania, but in the villages, it is a little more conservative for women. So it's not like I was out getting coffee every
True.
single day in the same way that Kyle was. I
I
had my
was.
own I had my own group of people and my own things too. And I had an ex-Peace Corps volunteer that
Yeah.
lived in my town. So I had people to be with, but it was in a different way socially. So I think that made me more of like a listener in Albania.
That's true. It's true.
But yeah, we're two very different people.
Wow. So you almost switch extrovert and introvertness. I knew.
Switch roles a little bit in
Hashtag
in
Albanian Kyle.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Albanian Kyle's what?
Albanian Kyle is a trip. If we get to come visit next year or whenever, when you're still there, you hopefully will get to meet Albanian Kyle.
If Kyle switched over to Albanian, like just saying a few sentences now, would it be apparent or would it have to be during a full conversation?
I'd have to get into.
Diane's disagreeing with you, Kyle.
But
if you start on a topic, Kyle, you'll get it. If you start saying anything, if you started saying like, I'm good and this is my life here and I live in Bangkok now, it could be about anything. He just gets so loud and his hands are everywhere and Albanian Kyle.
So what do you want me to say?
Oh, okay. So the next natural question is, hey, could you like tell us something about yourself in Albanian so we can see this transformation? But that might be an uncomfortable thing to do. So
yeah, jam çik modesto, nuk e di çfarë them është.
Oh my God, it's completely apparent.
This is the most embarrassed he's ever been ever.
Po si që thash, nuk e di çfarë them. Kur flas shqip, jam 100% dikush tjetër. Jam person që ka qenë flas me gjithë, s'kam turp fare. Kurse kur flas anglisht jam pak më mbyllur, jam më qetë, jam I sinqert.
Edhe ka fituar nga gjitha, nga sut, gjitha, nga goja.
The eyebrows, the glow. You glowed. You glowed when you did that. You changed.
He really does change.
I have no idea what you said, Kyle. No idea.
He's seriously another person. And it's funny too, because when people listen to this podcast, his accent sounds Albanian. Mine does not. I sound like an American trying real hard to speak Albanian. He sounds like a nice Albanian boy who grew up abroad.
Sometimes I get that. Yeah.
Sometimes he gets villagey, sometimes he gets Kosovar, but pretty much everyone believes it. They buy into him and they're like, hey, American lady, you sound all right.
Kyle, thank you for doing that. And I'm not making fun of you. I have utter respect for what you just did. And the fact that you can be that animated in another language. It's amazing. It's amazing to me. I think that's fantastic. But yeah, literally everything. You'll see when the video goes up. Everything about you changed facially.
It really does. It's fantastic. Albanian Kyle. And for me, it's like I said, I'm more soft-spoken in Albanian. So like, if we were in a conversation, I would add in like a sentence and be like, I know stuff too. Or like, I'll talk one-on-one with people, but in a big group, it's harder.
To be fair, Diane, should we ask you to tell us something about yourself too so we can see that?
Un kam pak turp, sepse shqipin tim në fakt është më keq që ishte, sepse ishte mirë kur ishte në Shqipëri edhe tani nuk jam. Edhe prandaj është aq I vështirë për mua dhe është gjuha shumë e bukur, por shumë I vështirë për mua edhe tekst. Kam teksti Amerikan normal, nuk kam mundësi boj teksti shqiptar. Kështu është, por kam shumë respect për njerëzit në Shqipëri edhe normalisht.
You channeled my grandma just a little bit there. That was freaky. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, you even brought out the hand and everything.
Like I said, old people. I hung out with people in their 30s as well, but I did spend a significant amount of time with old people. Oh, wait.
I'm completely and utterly bypassing something the listeners will probably want to know. Can you guys share what you talked about while you were doing that?
I said that, Albanian, I'm a little embarrassed because my Albanian used to be much better when I lived in Albania, when I was using it. And now that I live away, it's not as good. And I can't do an Albanian accent. So I know I sound American, but, I am American and, I would love to do an Albanian accent, but it's just really difficult. And it's a beautiful language and I have a lot of respect for it, but it's hard for me.
I said, I don't really know what to say. I'm kind of modest. When I speak Albanian, I'm okay with speaking to everybody. In English, I'm a little bit more reserved. I'm a little more closed. In both, I'm sincere. And then I kind of trailed off. And then,
blah, 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 etc.
Yeah.
Thank you both for sharing that. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. Are there any things you still are curious about the Albanian language that you ask people and you feel like you don't really get a reply that's satisfying?
Oh God, that's a big question. Can we focus on that a little more? Because I feel like
For me,
yeah, I'd
I
have
know
to think about that.
for me, like the different dialects, right? So there's Albanian that Kosovars speak. There's Geg. There's Tosk. There's all these other dialects. There's what we affectionately call Shiplish, which is either the people who live abroad or the expats who speak Albanian and English. Shiplish. We have a lot of that. And I just think it's so interesting that whenever we met someone from Kosovo, or especially when I was in Himara, there were a lot of tourists. So even people from the north who spoke Gag, or people who even sounded a little bit more northern or used northern slang, or people who were from Kosovo, they could always understand what we were saying. You know what I mean? In standard Albanian. But it was so hard to understand what they were saying. And yet I have Albanian friends who go to Kosovo and they're like, I know what's going on. And I'm like, it's sometimes, obviously, yes, in general, I could understand when we visited Kosovo what was being said, or food at a restaurant, just some of the vocabulary changes. What really impresses me, and I'll never understand how the dialects could be so diverse. Someone once tried to compare it to the US, who was in our Peace Corps group, and they tried to compare it to the US and say it's like, oh, Southern drawl and Texas English versus like Cali speak versus like the Boston accent. I used to have a little bit more of a Boston accent. I speak like standard American English now. But I think that comparison pales into how different the dialects really are.
They're very localized.
Because you go and some words that you say in Toss, like people in Gag are like, no, we don't say that. We say this. It's very interesting to me how that all functions in one it's a large diaspora, but relatively small area in Albania, and all these other parts have their own thing, but yet everyone somehow just knows that's their own thing. You know what I mean? I always found that weird.
Oh yeah, like how how a lot of people know the particular sayings of each region.
Yeah, like how to say fasule and when to say grosh, and how to say, you know what I mean? Like those small things, or when to say, I can't remember the northern word for watermelon now.
Yeah.
There's a northern word for a watermelon that I can't remember now.
Shumti is what I
And
say.
then there's a different word in the south for watermelon, which is it's like, and then there's boston, which is melon, which some people just use for all melons.
Kefir.
And then there's kefir, which is just one kind of melon, but some regions just say this is a melon. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just because it's not as well documented as some other languages that there's vocabulary that just like gets wishy-washied around,
I was just going to say, it's Albania as a whole is a really fascinating language, especially, when you're here, people are very proud to tell you that despite like Ottoman occupation, despite not being able to speak the language in their own country for 500 years, the language has survived. It has prevailed. And like the first written accounts of Albanian are in completely different alphabets. They didn't have their own standardized alphabets until recently. So to me, all that stuff is very interesting, like the history and the development of the language and now the modernization of the language.
How important it is to people.
Yeah.
It's crazy how, and this is all kind of all over the Balkans too, language is such an important part of culture there.
It's the unifier, it feels like.
Yeah, that people really care. Like in Himara, the Greek speakers, the ones who are ethnically Greek, they love that their first language is Greek. They are proud to be ethnically Greek. And they have some dialectal words that they only really use in that region. And they're so proud of it, just the same as the Albanian speakers who are there in the same town, tiny little town. The Albanian speakers who are there are so proud that their first language is Albanian, and they have this unifying glue of this language. It's very, very interesting. Albanians are very proud people.
That's also what I loved about being in Albania. And knowing the language too gives you more access, I feel like, to hearing people's personal accounts with history, family histories, and all that. Yeah, we could do an entire podcast about that alone, I feel like.
Oh, I'm sure. Wow. Well, you guys are in Thailand now. Are you going to be there for a while? Because it sounds like you want to come back here.
Well, part of us does. A part of us will always find some fondness in Albania.
I'll always love the Balkans.
Will always love the Balkans. It's definitely not something we're ruling out, but I do have a work contract. We do have jobs here. So, like I have to wait. I can't really make any decisions until
we'll be here
the end of that contract.
We'll be here for a little while.
So, or not the end if we want to resign, So it depends on a lot of moving parts, but definitely the Balkans will always be like a home for us. And it's definitely a place we're going to visit repeatedly in our lives. And we sometimes play around with the idea of after a few steps down the road, like would we go back or what would that look like? And it's definitely not off the table. I wouldn't say it's like the first thing on the front burner.
Yeah.
But it's not off the table.
This is also like, I mean, Albania for both of us was the first country we lived in outside of the US. We developed a lot of personal connection there with the culture, the people, language, all that. So it is and always will be very near and dear to our heart.
Especially the people.
So we'll, like Diane said, we'll always be back. When? We don't know. That's the question mark. Yeah.
I mean, especially people the people, thank God for the internet because.
Yeah.
It would be a lot harder to say, oh, we don't know if we couldn't still keep in touch with a lot of our friends there, both expat and local, we feel very close to a lot of people there. So.
Yeah. If the listeners are curious about learning more about you, is there any place online on any of the socials that you'd like to share with them?
Absolutely. They come anytime to my Instagram.
Yeah, it's like, follow my Instagram.
Yes. Kyle doesn't really do social media. He's one of those people who has social media so his mom knows he's alive. But really and so he can follow other people. So like I tag him and stuff so his family can see, in fact, Kyle and Diane are alive.
Yeah, I'm not.
I love Instagram. I'm huge. Yeah. I think Instagram's the best social media. It's because I used to be into Twitter and now I got rid of it because I'm all about Instagram. My handle is @lifeofdi, but between it's like life __of__die. Yeah. Life of die.
Okay. I'll have that in the show notes, but wow, that's difficult. Yeah.
It's not that hard.
It's easier than it sounds.
Yeah, it's way easier than when you say it out loud, it sounds weird. But if you see it,
it's written, it's life of die.
Just with underscores in between.
With 2 underscores in between. Okay. Well, it'll be in the show notes for folks.
So anyway, yeah, it's great. Life of die. I like to document what we do, what we can do. It's been a little weird with COVID.
Yeah.
I document some of I kind of talk about being an international teacher a little bit, what I can, because a lot of schools have confidentiality stuff. So I try to talk about what I can and post about what I can. But we're also posting a lot about traveling, and we just stayed in an awesome place run by an NGO. We're trying to highlight those experiences. So, and we did a lot in Albania as well. So my feed, you can look through it, and there's tons of posts about Albania, about restaurants, about Tirana, about a ton about Himara, the best place in Albania. Just saying.
No bias there, huh? No.
We have a lot of photographs as well. We had our engagement party there. We had a lot of good memories there. So a lot of highlights. And the Balkans in general, we travel a lot.
Pretty much every Balkan country except Bosnia and Slovenia.
I'm missing Bosnia and Romania.
Yeah, the jury.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. Well, I'm following you now and these pictures. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to stay focused for the closing of the podcast, but now I've got these cool pictures. This is difficult. I'm closing it down.
Follow along. And like I said, I really try to focus on sensible travel blogging. Obviously, we still stay at resorts sometimes. You know what I mean? We're still people, but we do try to do ethical tourism and homestays, and we try to volunteer. We try to do those things still. So we'll see if we can keep that up. Hopefully COVID's made it a little difficult, but we'll see.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.